if you don't give up, something is going to happen to turn the story around for you. Something is going to happen. I did not have hope. I looked for a job for 14 months and then 3 separate jobs in the same week of July where I came so close to getting, and they rejected me the same week of July. So I had no hope. The hope came after I got the job in August, and I saw that somehow like things turn around. If you keep going, something is going to happen that's going to change the story for you eventually.
In this episode, Edith and her guest talk about unemployment, switching careers, and why it's so hard to find a new job.
Hi folks, I'm your host Edith Richards, and you may know me from my podcast series, Myers-Briggs Question Corner, or my website at topcareer.com. I've spent the last 20 years of my career helping people get smart about their careers. And I've found that lots of smart people aren't successful. Why is that? I'm convinced it's due to emotional intelligence. In EQ at Work, I'm bringing you inspiring people and messages to help you get smart about your emotions. Hi folks, Edith Richards here, and today I'm with Leah Zibulsky, who's the Deputy Communications Team Lead at the U.S. Department of Energy Solar Energy Technologies Office. Welcome, Leah.
Thanks for having me, Edith.
Yeah, we're so glad you're here. It's such important work that you're doing, and we could have an entire episode just devoted to that. But we're here to talk about your career journey. I know it's taken you a lot of uphill work to get to this point in your career, and I'm sure we're going to get into all of that. But first, welcome to the show. I'm so pleased you're here, and I'm really excited for you to share your story because it's such an inspiration to anyone who's been stuck professionally, who's sent out thousands of resumes, gone on interviews, and essentially just has done everything right. And for whatever reason, they aren't getting the results that they want. So that's a little preview about what we'll be talking about today.
That's right. I was on that uphill road and we met there. So I guess that's why I'm here. I'm happy to talk about it.
Yeah. So speaking of that, I'd like to start out with the story of how you and I met, and then we can get into all these career successes that you've had. A few years ago, I got laid off from a job that I loved, and I was fortunate to land a new job very quickly in a completely different industry. And I won't lie, it was really rough. And I think in most workplaces, there's not nearly enough emphasis on a positive onboarding experience and helping new employees get acclimated properly, training new employees. But that's another story. Suffice it to say that very shortly after I started this new job, I was asked to speak at a local event with an organization I'm involved with called Leaders in Energy. And I was asked to speak on re-careering, modern job search, especially with regards to green careers and careers in the renewable energy space. So fast forward a little bit, I did my little speech. I talked about being laid off and how I was able to land this new job so quickly. And as usually happens at events like this, several audience members came up to me afterwards, and you happened to be one of those people, Leah. And, I don't know what it was about you, but to this day, it's something I remember so viscerally, definitely something positive about your demeanor, because you asked me in that moment how my new job was going. And I still remember this so clearly. I said, I've cried every day. And I watched your face, and it was this look of compassion mixed with, oh my God, I can't believe this stranger just told me that. And I've thought about that moment so many times since then. What was it about you that caused me to be completely vulnerable in that moment to a stranger? I'd never met you before. And I can only conclude that you have some natural quality about you that disarms people, or at least it disarmed me, and gets people to open up to you and maybe even trust you.
Yeah, It's funny because you recently reminded me of that moment when we were preparing for this podcast, and I had forgotten about it. But when you talked about it, it came rushing back to me. And, it was this mixture of like, it broke my heart, but it also made me happy because I wanted to hear why you were crying every day. And I think, I've been told that I have no poker face. So this has been good and bad for me throughout my career and throughout my life. But I think the fact that, I have no poker face, and I honestly wanted to know how things were going. I was interested in what you had to say that day. Obviously, I came up to you afterwards. So, you saw that I had no poker face. I am who I am. And that must have come through for you. And that started our relationship of, work and getting to know each other and trying to help each other.
Yeah, it totally, like, it broke the ice in a way. And we are often told, especially in the professional world, we're told to hide our feelings. Feelings have no place in the professional world. And for those of us who are perhaps more emotional or sensitive, that's a really tall order to fill. And I think a lot of us end up feeling, at least on some level, like we have to give up a part of ourselves if we're to be successful at work. So that's kind of a segue into how, I guess, your expressiveness or your lack of a poker face, because it must have worked for you in some way for you to get to the point where you are now.
I suppose it has, because I am where I am, which is having a really good job as a contractor at the Department of Energy solar office. So it's where I wanted to be. And I got here, poker face or no poker face. And like I said, I don't have one. And I'm full of feelings all the time. I'm a very sensitive person. I always have been. I haven't always been this outspoken. If you had asked me 20 years ago to do a podcast, I probably would have said no. I was very, very shy.
Let's talk about how you got to this point in your career.
Okay. I had been doing something completely different for 17 or so years prior. I was a copy editor, which basically means that I fix grammar according to style at different magazines in New York. So I lived in a different city and I did a completely different job. And I was very happy doing that job until I wasn't anymore, because it had been about 17 years. And I became obsessed with climate change. So I was reading a lot of Elizabeth Colbert articles in the New Yorker and picking up books and things like that. So I was getting antsy.
So you had been a copy editor in New York. Were you working for magazines or?
Yeah, I was. I had been on staff at several of them, including GQ, a magazine called Details back in the day, Smart Money. Those are gone now. And then I went freelance for the last 10 years of my career. I was freelancing. So I'd work at like Glamour during the day, or actually I worked at Glamour at night, and In Style during the day, or Popular Science or Time or New York Magazine. So I bounced around a lot. I was successful. It was a good thing. I had the time. I also was working, about 70 hours a week a lot of the time for not a whole lot of money.
Oh, wow.
So I was burning out and I was getting bored.
So then you started, as you said, started reading articles on climate change, and that got you interested in a totally new career field.
Yeah, I was really enraged because I saw a lot of problems that were happening that were totally our fault as human beings, and nobody was really doing enough about them to make a significant difference. And, I'm not somebody who likes to march in the streets, although I have definitely done that because my father was a civil rights activist. And so I think my first protest was at the Iraq War in Times Square when I was a teenager. But, when I see a problem that I get upset about, I want to fix it somehow. And in this case, it meant making it my new job, literally my job to fix climate change. So I ended up, I guess it was 2016. I wasn't planning on going back to school, but I went to a green fair at the Javits Center in New York City. And there was a man who was waving at me behind a booth. He was just trying to get my attention. And it turned out he was the director of the Sustainability Management program at American University. And he wanted to try to get me interested in going back to school, which again had not been the plan, but it became the plan. So
he convinced you then to apply to American University, and I guess that led you down to DC.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. So in 2016, I also should mention that I'm slow to make big changes, right? I'd been dissatisfied with my life for probably since 2012. And it wasn't until 2016 that I actually made the move. And I will say that one of the big things that happened that made me make the move was my mother dying in 2015, which was kind of a surprise. But after that year of grief and managing her estate and taking care of everything, that was when I realized, okay, it's my time now.
Okay.
And something like, get me out of this town, get me out of this current career, like, let me start over, because this is my life now. When you lose somebody close to you, as so many people have during this horrible year, it shakes you up and it makes you really get out of your comfort zone. So yeah, I came down to DC. I did the master's program in 1 year because I went full time. I was lucky enough to have saved enough money where I could go full time. I'd also received some money from the school to help. And then I was thrown into this world of having completed the program. I had a master's degree. This is actually my second one. I have a master's degree in journalism, which was also a 1-year program that I got from Boston University like 20 years ago. So that, which led me into, working in magazines, which I had always wanted to do. And now I wanted to do something related to sustainability. So that's what I had. And then I couldn't get a job.
Oh my goodness. Okay. This is really quite a story here. I mean, first of all, that you approximately at the age of 40, I guess, you just decided to drastically change your life, to take back your life in a way. And of course, there were several events that happened, notably your mom passing away, that kind of served as the catalyst for that change. There's so many people, I think, probably tuning in who have dreamed of doing something like this, doing something more meaningful career-wise or professionally. And you've had the courage to do that, even though, as you said, it took a couple of years of being dissatisfied. But you did, it sounds like, pretty suddenly take that leap. And then, after doing so, it sounded like didn't work out the way that you wanted them to.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Things did not go well. I spent 14 months looking for a job after I graduated.
Oh, gosh.
I was doing some freelance copy editing on the side, but they were, book projects, which I'm, of course, grateful for because they kept me afloat as my savings dwindled, and I sat in this apartment in Washington, D.C., where I basically had, no family or friends. Okay, maybe one or two, but I mean, I have a tendency to look on that, like the glass is half empty all the time, and I have a history of depression as well. So to not be working for 14 months after having been able to get jobs just by word of mouth, because I was good at what I did back in New York. And now I'm in a new city and I completed this program and I was at zero. I was negative, right? And that's how we met.
Yeah, and I've talked to so many people over the course of my career who have been there, and I'm sure there's a lot of folks tuning in right now who are kind of in the same boat. They've been laid off or they've been furloughed. And you mentioned this horrible year. I should mention here, we're right at the end of 2020 as we're recording this, and we are still in the midst of the pandemic. So there's going to be more people when this episode is published, I think, who will be tuning in and in this boat of, trying everything and not being able to get the results that they want. So during that time, I have to ask, what worked for you? How did you get through that dark time?
I got a dog.
Okay.
I know it was in January. I've lost all sense of time and meaning. We're what are we? We're in December of 2020 right now. It's been a long pandemic and I barely know what day it is. So I do know that I got my dog in January. It must have been months after I graduated, probably 6 months after. And I knew that I needed a reason to get out of bed in the morning because, like I said, depression. And I knew a dog was going to do it. And I had a dog previously, but she had died 10 years prior. And I didn't get over it for 10 years. I've got Nero now. He's saved my life, honestly. So for anyone who lives alone like I do, I should mention I am child-free and I am husband-free and always have been. And, maybe always will be. But, it's important to have connection with something. So aside from, I have a small circle of close family and friends that I would, text because I'm not a phone person anymore. Nobody really is in these times, although the pandemic has probably changed that. But back in 2017, in 2018, when I was job searching, I wasn't a chatty person. So I would text or I would email, right? So, staying connected and getting a dog.
That's an important first step, because as I've often told other job seekers over the years, whatever it is that you're feeling, whether you're anxious, whether you're depressed, whether you're desperate for a job, somehow that's going to come across when you communicate people, when you go to networking events, when you go to interviews. And so whatever negative emotions that you're feeling there in the moment, you do need to somehow manage to get a handle on that before you actually move forward with the technical aspect of the job search. So fast forward to that. What actually worked for you in terms of, sending out resumes, LinkedIn, job search websites? How did you manage to get this position where you are now?
I mean, I leveraged the school, right? They had career counselors. I wouldn't leave them alone because, they basically owed me as far as I was concerned. But yes, I beefed up my LinkedIn profile. I went to events. I am not a networker. I hate networking. I know I sound like probably an extrovert right now, but don't consider myself one. So I have social anxiety. I don't like going to events, but I made myself go because I was desperate. And so I went to events and I made myself talk to, one or two people at each thing. I got business cards. I tried to use them. I didn't always, because depression and fear of failure and also, I guess, imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
You spin out. It's impossible to kind of control that sometimes. There are ups and downs. There are good days and bad days, and you just have to the thought of not having a job and absolutely needing a job was enough to put the fear of God in me to keep going.
Yeah.
Keep sending out the resumes. You were the one who taught me, because I went to an event after I met you that first time. You told me about something you were doing at the Arlington Library. So I think it was a resume building workshop. And you were the one that told me to tailor my resume to each job posting so that you use the language that the job posting has in your resume so the algorithms can pick it up.
Yeah.
So I started doing that. And to be honest with you, I do not know how I found this job. I mean, where exactly I found it, I don't know I wasn't on a listserv. Like, I found it and I barely understood what it was, which is ironic because I work in communications and it wasn't abundantly clear what this position was going to be. I did know that it had something to do with solar. I knew what solar was, but not to the extent that I do now. And I went for it and they called me really quickly. Like, the time that I remember, it was August. I think I applied for that job on August 5th. And by August 18th, I had an offer.
Wow. Okay. So that was a really quick turnaround time then.
Very quick. And it was like magic.
And well deserved too, because after 14 months sending out job application after application and
hundreds,
I know that you've gone on many different interviews and things just did not seem to click for whatever reason. And I think you were someone who was doing everything correctly. And I just cannot imagine how devastating that must be in the midst of that to, you'd question, what's wrong with me? What am I doing wrong? And still you had something inside you that forced you to keep moving on. Now, you mentioned it was fear of God and fear of not having a job, but it to me sounds like there was something else there too, some glimmer of hope, glimmer of optimism there that, somehow that just kept you going. Maybe it was your dog, but things ended up working out and suddenly you got this new position. And since you've gotten it, it sounds like there's been a lot of good things that happened. It was just a rapid series of promotions for you.
Well, I did get promoted. First, let me go back because I do want to address what you said about the glimmer of hope.
Mm-hmm.
I only have that glimmer of hope now in hindsight. I did not have it then. What happened back then, actually, and I'd forgotten about this, or I crushed it down because it was so painful, was that the June and July, right before August, when I got the job, I had come so close to getting 3 separate jobs. I am talking, I went to a different city and they bought me lunch and they introduced me to like 10 people and took me around.
Oh,
Yeah, there were 3 jobs that I came that close with that summer, and all 3 of them rejected me the same week in July.
oh my gosh, that's awful.
It was so bad. It was so dark that, I mean, I am telling you, so there was no glimmer of hope.
Oh.
What I will say is that there must be some magic out there because, and I'm a realist, okay? But the fact that I got this job, I don't remember how, except that I do remember applying for it and couldn't tell you which website, and that it finally worked out. That's the magic. So I will say, if you don't give up, something is going to happen to turn the story around for you. Something is going to happen. I did not have hope. I looked for a job for 14 months and then 3 separate jobs in the same week of July where I came so close to getting, and they rejected me the same week of July. So I had no hope. The hope came after I got the job in August and I saw that somehow like things turn around. If you keep going, something is going to happen that's going to change the story for you eventually.
I love that. So just don't give up hope. There is bound to be something that happens. It's so important for anybody who's tuning in to hear what you're saying there. I think it's so easy these days for people to lose hope and to give up on themselves. And just any small piece that you have, whether it's a pet, whether it's getting outside and taking a walk every day, as long as there's that little bit to get you up and get you moving and get you looking to the future, those little things that you're doing every day, that's where you start to build on things. And that's what starts to inspire hope. And I want to, Leah, circle back to something that you said at the beginning of our conversation, which was really about your, you called it your poker face. I'm going to call it like your natural expressiveness. I think this is it's such a part of who you are. And to greater or lesser degrees, I think it has contributed to your success professionally. What do you think about that?
I think that's probably true. I think a lot of us are taught to go through life presenting one way and then being another. So I guess what I mean by that is that, especially for women, and especially if women of a certain age, although, things are starting to change now. But, my mother was a very sweet lady and was a good girl. Okay. She was a very good girl. And then my father was a loudmouth. And I am the glorious combination of these 2 people where I could see that, my mother probably loved my father because he was just unfailingly himself. He had no filter, just said what he wanted. It didn't matter what other people thought of him. My father told me from a very young age when I was being bullied, of course, in 6th grade, it doesn't matter what other people think. What do you care what other people think? And of course, I did care because I was in 6th grade, but and he couldn't really tell me why I shouldn't because, when you're in 6th grade and you're a girl and your father is telling you this, it doesn't always, sink in.
Yeah.
But yeah, I saw both sides of how you're supposed to be and how you really are. And for a lot of people, that's 2 different things. And for me, I'm not good at that. I am my father's daughter in the way that I am expressive. So I can try to say the right thing, but if you're looking at me while I'm saying it, you're going to see that it's not really what I want to be saying.
Your words are saying one thing, but the expression on your face is saying something completely opposite.
Yeah. And then, of course, because I'm me, I often defer to comic relief just to try to make it a kind of an even playing field for everybody so that we're all feeling comfortable. And also because I need to be liked, right? We all need to be liked in this world. And we will all do all sorts of things to try to get people to like us, especially in a work situation because it's your job, and you need your job. I just try to make it, the even playing field where I crack a joke just to try to get us all on the same page. Like, hey, we're just humans here, like trying to get through the day. But here's my opinion about that thing you just asked me. And it may not be what you wanted to hear, and I'll do what you say because you're my boss, but I might not like totally agree with it right now.
But somehow you've been able to find a workplace that not just accepts you for that, but values you for your opinions and for your frankness. And they've rewarded you as such. I mean, you've been able to grow with this company.
That is actually true.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I was hired as a program analyst / writer, and I got promoted to the deputy communications team lead position. About a year after that, there was a vacancy and I was approached to advance into it. And so I've taken that on, and my role has since changed dramatically, and it's been quite a challenge, and I've learned so much. But yes, I find that I work in an office where people accept me for who I am and maybe even like me for it. And you can't really ask for a whole lot more than that. But foundationally speaking, if you're not comfortable with where you spend the majority of your life, you're in trouble.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're all on some level, we may not be aware of it, but we're looking for workplaces and organizations and people who support these natural tendencies in ourselves. And after a long, long uphill battle, I think you finally found it. And I'm so pleased for you.
Thank you.
And as we're wrapping up here, I would like to cite this one question for you, because I think there's a lot of people out there who are not only struggling with the job search, but even deciding if a career change is the right choice for them. I think a lot of us reach this point mid-career, and we want to do something that's more personally fulfilling or more meaningful. What would you say to these folks who are even struggling to make that decision?
If you go with your gut and check your happiness level, right? Because I was just saying, if you're not happy where you spend the majority of your day, which is at work, I do think you're in trouble. And if you are considering like changing your career, the fact that you're considering it means that something isn't quite right. You're not checking all the boxes that you want to check in your life. And we're only here for a limited amount of time. It's our lives. It's our chance to just, run our lives the way we want to. And so if you check your gut, what would you rather be doing? You don't even have to know. I didn't know how to verbalize. That was a big problem for me. I work in communications and I couldn't verbalize exactly what I wanted to be doing. I just wanted to solve climate change. And I didn't know how to do that, but I did know that I could write and I could edit and I could put words together. And I could also, it turns out, make complicated science accessible to regular folks who are not scientists. And that's what I do. And that's great for me. Like I figured it out eventually, but for a long time, I couldn't figure that out. So I'm talking to the audience here. You don't have to know. You just have to have an inkling. And it would have helped to know, like maybe it wouldn't have taken me 14 months to find a job. But if you have an inkling that there's something else you'd rather be doing, then I would investigate that pretty hard.
Absolutely. Take that leap. You don't have to know what the end result is going to be, but just take that leap of faith and it will surely be better than where you are now.
Yeah.
Leah, I really appreciate you sharing your story. It's so inspiring what you've done. How would you like listeners and subscribers to be able to get in touch with you?
Oh, you can find me on LinkedIn. Message me there, but tell me in the message who you are or why you're writing to me, because I'll probably overlook it otherwise. But yeah, so I'm Leah is Leah and Zibulsky is Zibulsky.
Okay, we'll provide your contact information in the listening notes. And if you're tuning in and would like to connect with Leah on LinkedIn, please do be sure to send a personalized message with your request and let her know that you heard her story on EQ at Work. And with that, folks, thanks for tuning in. Leah, thanks again for joining us here and wishing you all the best for lots of continued success.
Thanks, Edith.
I'd like to sum up this episode by talking about a prominent element of emotional intelligence that Leah shared, and that is emotional expression. This is our ability and tendency to remain transparent with our emotions and to share and communicate how we're feeling. When we're skilled in this area, as Leah is, we are open and congruent in the emotional messages that we send to others. Essentially, we're willing to share our emotions appropriately. Whether we're aware of it or not, we are constantly giving out messages at an emotional level. Sometimes it's the words we use. Other times it's our body language and our facial expressions. Other people register these messages that we send out, and they respond both consciously and unconsciously. If you're not skilled in emotional expression, you may tend not to communicate what you're thinking and feeling. You may show up as, for example, having a flat affect or a blank expression. Others may not know how to approach you. They may not know that you hear or understand what they're saying. You may have heard feedback that you're unaware of what's going on around you, or you may be asked if you're okay or if you're tuning in, and you also may show up as distrustful of others or detached or uncommunicative or even isolated. If this sounds like you, put EQ to work with these simple boosting strategies. It's always good to observe other successful people. Find some people whom you appreciate or admire and note their facial expressions, their body language, and the words that they use. Can you tell what emotion they're feeling? And if you can, ask yourself how you know that. By observing other people who express themselves well, you can better understand how to express yourself effectively. You can also coach yourself with a few simple questions. For example, how often do you talk about your emotions? How do others know what you're feeling? And how do other people respond to you in general? Lastly, there are a couple of actions that you can take right now to boost your emotional expression. First, take small steps and decide what you're going to express and what emotion that will be. Second, talk to a trusted friend or colleague and tell them how you're feeling. Third, notice your body language and your facial expressions when you express yourself. Do these match the words that you use? And finally, what impact do you have on people now? The more time you spend observing yourself and others, the more you'll boost your emotional expression and put EQ to work.
Thanks for listening to EQ at Work. Find us using the hashtag EQ at Work or visit our website eqatwork.net. Subscribe to this podcast via iTunes, Spreaker, or your favourite podcast platform. We'd love you to leave a rating or review, and if you have a moment, a simple share would be wonderful. Remember, tell your friends, mastering your emotions matters. Tune in next week when Edith talks about entrepreneurship and what to do if you are thinking about starting your own business.